Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Heather Jackson. Heather Jackson was 23 years old in 2012, and her life was a challenge. She had recently separated from her husband, Wayne, and they were in the process of getting a divorce. They had two young children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr. Despite the difficulties they faced as parents, Heather was determined to provide a happy life for her kids. She had found a new home on a quiet street near Lake Erie, which brought her some sense of relief. Heather and Wayne had been high school sweethearts, but their marriage had fallen apart. On September 8, 2012, Heather's friend Danielle Sorrell arrived at her house at 2:30 p.m. for a pre-arranged meeting. However, when Danielle knocked on the door, no one answered. She checked all the doors, but they were locked, leaving her wondering what was going on. Danielle was puzzled that Heather and her kids weren't at home despite their planned meeting. Even if Heather had changed her plans, she would have alerted Danielle. So, Danielle called Heather's mom, Jody, who was very close to her daughter and spoke with her daily. However, Jody couldn't reach Heather that day either. Danielle then contacted all of Heather's friends, but none of them knew her whereabouts. Her concern grew when she spotted Selena's pacifier on the porch. Danielle knew Heather would never leave the house without the pacifier, so something was off. Hours passed, but Heather still hadn't contacted her mom. Jody's unease called the police to request a check. The officers arrived, knocked on the door, and got no response. They circled the house, peeking through the windows, but saw nothing suspicious. Since they found no signs of forced entry or foul play, they couldn't enter the house without a warrant and left. At approximately 7:30 p.m., Heather's friends, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, arrived at her house after discovering she was missing. When no one answered the front door, Reiner proceeded to the back porch, forced the door open, and entered the home. Inside, they found Heather's naked body in the bedroom and immediately called 911. Sergeant Eric Gray Bill, a Sandusky police officer, responded to the scene and entered the house. He discovered Heather's body lodged between the box spring and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature around her neck. The TV was still on, but the children were nowhere to be found. Their room was empty. During their search of the house, the officers noticed a utility closet door that they had not yet checked. When Sergeant Bill opened the door, he found stacked boxes with objects behind them. Behind the boxes, he discovered the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately secured the crime scene. The officers were deeply shaken by the discovery, having never encountered a crime of such magnitude before. Heather's family and friends were even more devastated after the forensic examination results were revealed. According to court documents, Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, the deputy coroner for Lucas County, performed the autopsies on the 3 victims. Her findings showed that Heather Jackson's cause of death was ligature strangulation. Additionally, Dr. Barnett observed that Heather's rectum was unusually open after death, suggesting that an object was likely inserted into the area around the time of her death, causing it to remain in that state. Dr. Scala Barnett testified that both Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson also died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear was rolled up, indicating that the body had been redressed. Selena also had a rectal dilation similar to her mother's, again indicating that something was in her rectum at or about the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, testified that there was seminal fluid on the anal swabs obtained from Selena Jackson. Cox also noticed a stain in Selena Jackson's underwear, so she cut a small portion of that stained area for testing and determined that it contained a sperm cell. The police were determined to quickly catch the monster responsible for the crime. Since Heather's house was located next to Firelands Regional Medical Center, investigators obtained footage from the building's surveillance cameras, which they hoped would lead them to the perpetrator. Reviewing the CCTV footage, they identified a car that drove up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. Although the camera was far from the house and the darkness made it difficult to see, the car's headlights provided some clues about what happened. The footage showed the car backing into the driveway and remaining there for 11 minutes. At 11:08 p.m., the headlights turned on again, and the driver departed. Meanwhile, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner, the men who discovered Heather's body, were brought to the police station for questioning. The investigators questioned them separately, starting with Dan Reiner, who had called 911. Dan and Heather were friends, and when Dan discovered she was missing, he went to her house to look for her. He had to push the door hard to get in. After calling 911, the police asked Dan for a DNA sample, which he willingly provided. The results are nothing special, and he was released. The police then questioned Thomas Hansen, who claimed to have spoken with Heather on the phone the previous night. He said he drove to her house around 11 p.m. but didn't go inside. Instead, they chatted briefly outside, and then he left. This revelation helped the police identify the driver of the car seen on CCTV footage, Thomas Hansen. Hansen also revealed that he didn't enter Heather's house because she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, someone Hansen knew as Josh. Hansen's account matched Reiner's, stating that when he learned Heather was missing, he went to her house to investigate. After releasing the initial suspect, the police shifted their focus to a new suspect, Josh Case, who was at Heather's house on the night of her death. They quickly located him and brought him in for questioning. Josh admitted to knowing Heather for years and being at her house that evening, where they watched TV while the children slept. He also claimed to have gone to the store to buy breakfast for the kids, returning to the house before a friend picked him up at around 1 a.m. Josh acknowledged having consensual intimate contact with Heather. Investigators verified his alibi by reviewing the store's CCTV footage, which confirmed he entered the store at 11:20 p.m. While this corroboration supported his testimony, it did not rule out the possibility that Josh might still be involved in Heather's tragic death. Heather's last known contact was with Josh Case, making him the prime suspect. He provided a DNA sample, which was compared to the DNA found on the victims' bodies. The results eliminated Thomas Hansen and Dan Reiner as suspects, as their DNA did not match. However, Josh's DNA matched the DNA on Heather's body, but not on her children's bodies, indicating another person was present that night. This was not surprising, as Josh had previously admitted to an intimate relationship with Heather. The police now focused on finding the DNA of the second person involved. They quickly ruled out Heather's husband, Wayne, who was going through a divorce with Heather and lived in another state. The investigators turned to Heather's cell phone records for answers. The records showed Heather was active on her phone, including on the night of her death. Her last phone conversation took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. The police's next step was to identify the owner of the phone number Heather last spoke to. 36 hours after Heather's death, police obtained another CCTV footage that showed a white car arriving at her house around 3 a.m. This timing coincided with when Heather stopped using her phone, suggesting a possible connection. The car left about an hour later, by which time Heather, Selena, and Wayne were likely already dead. Although the footage was not clear enough to reveal the license plate, investigators identified the car as a Cadillac. Further investigation led police to the owner of the phone number Heather had called before her death. The number belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton, who had a 30-second conversation with Heather at 3:12 a.m. A background check on Clinton revealed a disturbing history. He had been released from prison in February after serving 13 years for 2 counts of felonious assault and manslaughter. Clinton had pleaded guilty to the 1997 death of 18-year-old Misty Keckler, who was found strangled, naked, and bound in a bathtub. The similarities between Keckler's death and Heather's raised concerns among investigators, especially given that Clinton had been released from prison just 6 months before Heather and her children's deaths. This raised the possibility that Clinton had returned to his violent ways after his release. Curtis Clinton became the prime suspect in the murder of Heather and her children, and the police urgently needed to locate him to prevent any further harm. The police visited Clinton's last known address but were unable to find him. However, they soon discovered a white Cadillac parked on a nearby street. A search of the vehicle revealed a receipt from a gas station dated the night of the crime. The investigators reviewed the gas station's CCTV footage, which showed Clinton purchasing water and beer while appearing calm. This was after the time Heather and her children were killed. The police were received information that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to a local hospital. They immediately went to the hospital, found Clinton, and arrested him, taking him into custody at the police station. Clinton denied any involvement in the deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. He admitted to having dated Heather for 5 months and having an intimate relationship with her. According to Clinton, Heather had many personal problems and had asked him for financial and emotional support. He claimed that he didn't know her children well. Clinton initially stated that he last saw Heather on Thursday, September 6th, when he gave her $328 and they had intimate contact. However, when the investigator showed him phone records indicating that he had spoken with Heather at 3:12 a.m. on September 8th, Clinton corrected himself, saying that it was actually Friday night or early Saturday morning when he last saw her. Clinton claimed that he didn't stay long at Heather's house, dropping off the money and then leaving after their intimate encounter. He couldn't recall what time he arrived home. Clinton suggested that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left, as Heather had mentioned receiving an irritating call or text while he was with her. When confronted with the fact that he was the last person to have contact with Heather, Clinton expressed doubt. Curtis Clinton was arrested and jailed after his DNA was found on the victims. In a recorded call to his mother, Clinton expressed regret and confusion, saying he wished he'd sought help. He also hinted at a violent temper, suggesting it could happen again. His mother acknowledged the family's struggles, but said they'd learned to manage them, and noted that Clinton had stopped taking his medication, which contributed to his behavior. Clinton told his mother that he planned to plead guilty to the charges and accept whatever consequences came his way. The investigation led to multiple charges against Clinton. Furthermore, it was discovered that just 6 days before the murder of Heather and her children, Clinton had attacked a 17-year-old girl, choking her and forcing her to engage in intimate contact. The victim had gone to the hospital, where police collected DNA evidence that also linked Clinton to the crime. Clinton asked to move the trial to a different location, claiming that the local media had already publicized the case so much that it would be hard to find impartial jurors. However, the court denied this request. Clinton brutally murdered Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and the forensic evidence, including his DNA found inside Selena's body, revealed the horrific details of his crimes. Despite facing the death penalty, Clinton did everything he could to avoid it. When given the opportunity to speak before being sentenced, he did not show remorse or apologize to the victims' families. Instead, he attacked prosecutor Kevin Baxter and vowed to win on appeal and have his case retried. In November 2013, Clinton was sentenced to death for the brutal murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children. The judge also sentenced Clinton to life in prison without parole for what he did to 3-year-old Selena before strangling her, and added another 10 years for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before killing Heather and her children.